Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel 404. A very good morning to you. I'm Peter Ndurug and thank you for joining us. Now here's what you can look forward to on our show today. We'll be taking a look at a disturbing trend, and that's the increasing internet shutdowns by a number of African governments. We'll also be tackling a law in Tanzania for online content, and we're asking, is this a threat to free speech? We also look at what's inside your Sunday newspapers as well as in front. Stay tuned for that as we review a lot of those headlines. And lastly, we discuss another troubling issue, which is sexism in the media industry. We'll try and unpack all of that with my panel, who I'll introduce to you shortly. But before we engage with that panel, let's first take a look at the Sunday paper headlines. And we start with the Sunday Times. Well, that's leading with a story about how former Transnet boss Brian Molefe may face criminal charges for a raft of corruption and financial misconduct offences relating to the purchase of 1,064 new locomotives. He may also have to pay back some of the almost 19 billion rand that he's accused of squandering in the deal. The City Press, that's running a similar story, sort of a damning report recommending that Transnet lay corruption charges against four key players in the state capture. It's a former group executive, Brian Molefe, former chief financial officer, Anoj Singh, board subcommittee chairperson, Iqbal Sharma, and Gupta Lieutenant Salim Essa. All four of these men had close ties to the Gupta family and have been accused of enabling the family's access to business in parastatals as well as government entities. The Sunday Independent, well, that's carrying a story about former anti-apartheid stalwart and Rivonia treason trialist Andrew Mlangeni, who has warned that the land reform project would be a disaster if it's not handled well, as the Afrikaner farmers are not going to allow it to go ahead without a fight. The Sunday Tribune this morning, that's running with a story on how State Security Agency is looking into the possible extremist links of those stoking Shia-Sunni tension. Among those on the watch list is a prominent Islamic scholar who has publicly undermined people who signed the Cape Accord promoting peace and unity. The Weekend Argus, let's take a look at that. That's leading with a story about two more Western Cape mayors who will be facing the DA's disciplinary body for bringing the party into disrepute. One for refusing to resign from his position, and the other for some pretty anti-gay vitriol. Crossing our borders, let's go to Swaziland. The Sunday Observer there is carrying a story about how Mbabane municipality councillors failed in their endeavour to oust Chief Executive Officer Gideon Mhlongo, as their motion needed the CEO's validation. In West Africa, Nigeria's Sunday Trust is leading with a story about the 2019 general elections. Fears are already being expressed by political watchers and are predicated on the fact that the current Electoral Act provides for a window period of only 1 week within which the Commission, the INEC, could organise and conduct rerun elections. Alright, so quite a lot to look at and unpack. Some of the stuff on the front pages of those papers, and I will be unpacking that with my panel. And before we get into my first package, let's just introduce our panel. And I am joined by somebody that some of you might recognize. One of the hats he wears is as an actor, but he's a specialist lecturer broadcasting at Tshwane University of Technology. Tshamano Makhadi, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much indeed, Peter.
And next to you is Shepherd Mpofu, Senior Lecturer, Media and Communications at University of Limpopo. Thanks very much and welcome to you.
Morning, Peter. Thank you.
All right, so we've got a lot to unpack, and one of the subjects is this one, the proliferation of internet shutdowns in Africa. And this remains a serious concern, especially in the media industry, as it suppresses press freedom. Ethiopian journalist Befaqadu Haliu said that the internet for journalism is now like the air that you breathe. Without it, modern journalism means nothing. The internet has given to citizens of the continent a platform for free expression. Fearing the effects of such openness and transparency, well, some regimes on the continent have started to resort to online censorship. Okay, so let me start with you, Shepherd, because I know that this is something that you were able to discuss at a summit which took place at the University of Johannesburg recently. What is the trend? What are you seeing? What's coming across in terms of trying to shut down this internet space?
One of the most important things to note, Peter, is that the internet is probably one of the last born frees in Africa, as it were. And this born free is continually shackled or in shackles with our governments, especially those with dictatorship or autocratic tendencies. What do I mean? That every time there's an election dispute or every time there's a protest, the powers that be, especially in dictatorships or in quasi-dictatorships, you find that the first thing that they do is to block the internet. And this brings a lot of problems, not only to protect their regimes, but most of the industries now are run via the internet. There's internet banking. Some people are conducting their businesses over the internet. And when you shut down the internet to protect your personal political goals, you affect people economically, you affect people socially, you affect people's security. Just imagine this scenario where there's a protest and people police are shooting at people and people are running away and the like. And then there's a deaf person who relies on the internet, on WhatsApp and other updates to see what's happening in the neighborhood. And they're walking towards that direction and the internet is shut down. So there are no updates for that deaf person. They cannot hear the bullets. They cannot hear the noise, right? So they literally walk into harm's way in that scenario. So that's part of the problems. But on a larger scale, there's this fettering of people's rights. You cannot communicate. It's not even democratic, because in Africa we look at democracy as only, in some cases, as only the ability to vote. And thereafter, after voting, there's no more democracy for you. And people cannot express themselves properly. People cannot freely associate, you know. So these are some of the problems that shutting down the internet brings. And it's mostly, in most of the cases, for selfish reasons, political leaders that want to stay in power, not for the good of the community, not for the good of their societies.
How widespread is it across the continent? Is it a growing problem, or is it restricted to a few countries, so that we're not painting the whole continent with the same brush? That's my fear.
Yeah, we're not painting that's why I make it clear that it's countries with a dictatorship tendency or autocratic tendency or quasi-democracies, those that are not fully democratic. But also worrisome is the fact that in South Africa we had the signal being jammed at Parliament during the heated debates. And that is also problematic. You should not have even 1 second of blockade of the internet, especially when there are problems. And usually, what we might define as problems as citizens or even problems at law, they're not even problems. Those are problems that are seen by the leaders who want to protect themselves. And this thing is not as widespread. We cannot paint the whole continent like...
But it is a worrying trend. And I just wonder, Tshamano, you know, it sounds as if what this Ethiopian journalist Hailu said, this is the air that we breathe now. That's how important being online is to us, because if you can't access the digital footprint, you're pretty much left behind. No,
that's correct. I mean, I think Shepherd also made an example of the banking sector, for example. I mean, people these days, they're always pressed for time. You can just imagine if everyone was to go inside the bank, whether they want to make a transaction, or it just doesn't work. People are now relying on their mobile phones to make those transactions, and that's just one example. And when you think of social media, whether you're talking WhatsApp, people are able to communicate whether with their friends or maybe colleagues. So that plays a very important role in our daily lives. But let's just zoom into what does this mean within the broader context of a democracy. Take South Africa for example. I mean, if this was to happen here, what does it mean to the democracy that so many people have fought for? You know, and obviously, I mean, this, without doubt, it infringes on human rights, right to freedom of expression,
but there is
freedom.
another side to that, and the other side is, as Donald Trump says, fake news, fake news. So the democracy can be threatened and infiltrated, as we saw in the American elections. We don't know what the result might have been like if it was completely free and fair, but we do know there was some influence, and the Russians have been pointed to. Are we not in the same danger here, where if we just allow things without any kind of regulation, that we'll end up threatening that very same democracy?
No, of course. I mean, there's responsibility for both sides, whether if you're talking journalists and those that are practicing online, there's a responsibility for everyone. But my main concern is if we get to a point where, and I'm just focusing on the new law now that is now passed in Tanzania, the electronic and postal communication law. Now, if you look at that, I mean, people are going to be put in jail if they report on certain stories. So that on its own, it's a call for concern. But that doesn't mean people must just do as they wish. Journalists have a big responsibility in society, and whatever they do, they must do it responsibly.
All right, so we're going to take a break, and we'll carry on with this theme as we start looking at the Tanzania situation specifically, because I think it carries on with this challenge of closing down this space. So please stay with us. You're watching Media Monitor on this Sunday morning, and I nearly forgot, if you're a dad, happy Father's Day. I hope that you've been a good dad this year as well to deserve being called a happy Father's Day. We'll see you after this.
As SABC says, the new look, independent, impartial, will be having a new ways of policing where everybody is a police and there are less managers and more foot soldiers.
You must be at the forefront of this fight against the killing of young women. Why is it that we find it so easy to kill one another? We were killed by Boers in 1976. Now we are the killers. Can't be.
If this Airport name will not be a constant name, there will be war.
Over 5% of the world's population, or 360 million people, has disabling hearing loss.
Sometimes babies are born that can't hear. And especially during the pregnancy, where there's some infections that a mom could pick up that can actually transmit that damage to the ear, and those children can be born deaf.
I don't look at myself as a disabled person. I looked at myself as Bruno, not with a disability. I don't have barriers. I use South African Sign Language because I have a language.
And unfortunately, we need to talk to the teenagers and the young people out there. I know it's now fine to go to the concerts and listen to that loud music, but you're actually damaging those little hair cells all the time, and you're not going to pay the price now. You're going to pay the price when you turn 45, 50, and then all of a sudden we're going to see the damage done.
For all your health news, join Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and my guests in studio this morning, Tshamano Makhadi and Shepard Mpofu. And just before the break, we were taking a look at a concerning trend, which is the shutting down of spaces online, particularly across the African continent. Well, earlier this week, we saw all websites and blogs being banned by the Tanzanian Communication Regulatory Authority, the TCRA, from posting any further content until they complied with the new law, which was adopted in March. And this follows Tanzania's most famous online platform with more than 526,000 Twitter followers, Jamii Forums. Now, they've refused to comply with the new law's requirement that news websites reveal the identity of their sources and their contributors at the request of the authorities. All right, let me start with you, Shepard. This is again what we were talking about just before, but there's this little twist now about having to reveal sources, and that is a problem for the work of journalists. I mean, we do what we do because we can protect our sources. Yeah, it's quite a problem, and it's against the journalism ethics, and I think at law even journalists should be protected against that. Imagine if you were to report about corruption happening in the same department responsible for blocking the internet in that space. You know, somebody can be out to get you and a whole lot of other people. And also the other problem that this creates, it says within that law, it says the prohibited content is that which causes annoyance. How do you define annoyance? And annoyance to who? If a politician or a politician's wife is annoyed, then that's definitely annoyance to the whole population, and then somebody could be arrested for that. And another problem that this raises is that those who run internet cafes, they have to keep logs for a year for the people that have come to use the computers within that. So it's quite crazy, and it's unbelievable actually that this is happening in 2018, and we say that Africa probably is the youngest population in the whole world, and which effectively suggests that the future of this continent could be online or internet driven. Most of the businesses are coming up online, and we are doing these things to curtail these freedoms. And this brings me to my last point, that you find that we have an old generation of politicians who sometimes do not understand the internet or the functions of the internet. And then you have a political setup in Africa that is sort of patrimonial. You relate as a president to your people as a father, and they're supposed to respect you as if you're in a village. They cannot challenge you. Opposition political parties cannot be formed, and people cannot speak up to you. And therefore what you say is the word. The internet has afforded people to speak to power from below. And this is what causes discomfort in most countries, that, you know, we liberated these people, they're now speaking to us like this. Internet allows the younger generations to voice up issues, to speak about democracy that they want, or that they, you know, they dream of, you know. And then at the end of the day, these politicians do not seem to fathom and accept that kind of behavior, and therefore the best thing to do is to shut down the internet or create laws. Actually, these laws are actually shutting down mechanisms, because you can have your tablet there and they can put rules around. Don't touch the screen, right? I've shut down the internet for you. Even though it's on, I've shut it down because I've told you not to do certain things. If you do it, there are dire consequences. I'm a little bit surprised by Tanzania in particular, because, you know, they've had transitional, smooth transition in democracy. They've been hailed as a country really that kind of, in the modern Africa, one of the pillars of all that is good. And I don't understand, why would this president be so pressed to do this kind of thing? And also the other side of this is that when you want to reach your constituents, surely the best way to do it is through the internet. Why then shut it down?
No, I was also very surprised, Peter. I mean, when he came into power, he was hailed as the man of the people. But I think it also sends a message to all of us to say we always have to remain vigilant and guard against you know, this kind of tendencies, which in my view, I think they are a big threat to democracy. If you look at what has been suggested here, it simply means that if you were to report on anything that might be portrayed as negative on the side of those that are in power, you are definitely going to be arrested, as it has been suggested already, 12 months, you can just imagine. And again, the whole thing about you know, giving out the names of your sources, that goes against the ethics in journalism. You cannot reveal your sources. And of course, I mean, people are always going to be afraid to talk to journalists, knowing very well that they are most likely going to get in trouble.
So sometimes journalists can be naughty as well. They will say unnamed sources, and those unnamed sources actually don't exist. They might have just picked it up on Twitter or something. So is there a way that we can protect the aggrieved when people are accusing them of things in the dark? How do we solve that problem?
Legally, you can sue and go to court, and the court could be held in camera where there is no audience, and then you probably could reveal your sources in that instance, or if they don't exist, then you'd be found out. And there's danger of fake news, as you said in the beginning of this section, and we cannot control fake news through shutting down the internet. I think there's a best way to deal with this through self-regulation of the media. Or in most countries we find that they're using old colonial laws which were used to curtail print and broadcast media. They're now using this to control and curtail the internet. I think it's time Tanzania came up with an internet sort of law, but it's sort of couched in colonial, old and repressive terms that are not actually helpful for the development of the country. And one of the things that you have to do with these laws is that they have to enhance human rights, they have to enhance people's freedoms, they have to enhance development at all different levels, socio-political and economic. And when you have situations where journalists misuse the internet or lie, you know, then let's find ways to deal with this rather than seeking to curtail.
So I suppose if the story is true, it doesn't matter who the source is. It's only when it's not true, then you can sue someone for defamation and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it, there's just a lot that is compromised, you know, there. But here's another point which I also want us to look at, Peter, and Shepard raised this in terms of the different generations. Right now, everyone is talking about the future of technology, digital economy, and how do we as a continent grow within that space and become more competitive compared to other continents, you know, whilst in the meantime we're still fighting over things like the internet. Obviously, there's absolutely no growth there for Africa if you're looking at the future of technology, because everything now is done online.
Is there nothing positive in this Tanzanian cyber law? There must be some positive aspects.
The positive aspect, broadly speaking, is making people responsible, right? But the whole phrasing of this law is just problematic. The penalties for infringement are just problematic. $2,200 fine, 1 year in prison, that is a minimum, and some judge will even jail you for even 15 years or whatever is the case. So what we are saying is, just as the media, print and broadcast, are controlled by certain laws, or even constitutionally, the Constitution allows us to express our freedoms within the confines of the Constitution. And this law, in the way that it is presented, is actually, it's an affront to the Constitution, right? So
all right,
it's hard to find anything positive and representative in that regard.
All right, it is quite a concern, and we're going to move away from this a little bit, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at what's been trending on social media and what's been happening on the digital space, which we are still able to enjoy in a good number of African countries, particularly here in South Africa, and also be taking a look at what's happening in our newspapers. Stay with us, you're watching Media Monitor.
Special assignment. Crime keeps the society in terror and pain. Why so?
If someone phones me, tells me, okay, look, he needs a server, and I get you all driving, I'll take it.
What pushes normal people to be so hard, heartless, and brutally kill one another?
The other side of it could be more for their own psychological need. It might be part of a sexual fantasy that they have. It could be about power and control.
After proper investigation is followed, the perpetrator gets arrested.
It's part of the massive process. And ultimately, they have payments, right? I think justice is served.
Emotional scars remain.
We would pay any price to get him back, and the sad reality is that it's gone.
Special assignment. We unravel the truth every Sunday at 21:30.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Thanks very much for tuning in this Sunday morning, and happy Father's Day once again to all the dads across the country. It's time now to take a look and see what's been happening in our Sunday papers. We gave a hint on the front pages of what some of the stories are grabbing those headlines, but my guests now are going to tackle some of the stories inside, and I'm going to start with you, Tshamano. What's grabbed your attention?
The story that grabbed my attention is on Sunday Times page 4, all hands at work. President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday addressing the nation on Youth Day. There are a number of things that he touched on, which in my view I think are important because they speak to some of the challenges that the country is currently going on. If you look at our population, it's mainly dominated by young people. So the issue of unemployment has, and it continues to be, a call for concern. But maybe just listening to him yesterday, and I thought there were some positives that one can take out of that, which speaks to the creation of jobs and how do we do that. He talked about the private sector. And it also makes sense to me that in as much as there's an expectation from government to create jobs, but the reality is that government cannot really create jobs. If you were to check at the numbers, how many people are employed in government compared to the private sector. So I think there's a much greater need for a private sector to continue to encourage each other, really, to make sure that there are jobs in different sectors.
So here's a question for both of you, because both of you teach in tertiary institutions, and one of the challenges is the private sector desperately wants skilled young people, but you guys are not teaching them the things that they need when they get into the private sector. How do we fix that?
That's why I think, Shepard, in my view, I think it's very important that academics, irrespective of industries, but if you're taking an example of what we do within the media space, whether you're talking journalism, media studies, it's very important that you understand the needs of the industry so that you bring some of that knowledge to the classroom. From the classroom, when the students go to industry, at least they have been well prepared. And that, in my view, I think is very important because it talks to the issue of skills. So you don't want a situation where when they go to industry, they still have to be, trained. And I'm understanding the fact that these are students that you're talking about, but it's important that they at least have the basics. So that, in my view, I think it applies across the board, whether you're talking law, whether you're talking engineering, it doesn't really matter.
Or a quick comment from you, Shepherd.
In terms of curriculum development, sometimes we need guys in industry to come up and say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're looking at. Sometimes as academics, we just do our curriculum reviews and developments in silos. We just decide this is what we're going to do because this is what we think is happening in the industry. We don't get somebody from the industry and say, guys, things are shifting like this, let's do it this way. And in most cases, you find that in the academy, you might have old professors who are in the forefront of these things.
Using the same textbooks.
Using the 1993 or 1943 textbooks. And then you have young people like us who have experienced in the industry and are coming into the academy. And then we also need to be in the forefront of that. And the African academy, just like African politics, is still sort of patrimonial, patriarchal, like you respect the guy with white hair more than the guy with black hair.
Whilst I'm with you, what story grabbed your attention?
Maybe we should start with the Father's Day.
The Father's Day.
The Father's Day. I think I'm a bit worried about the statistics.
Frightening statistic there.
The statistics that I'm reading, especially black fathers, they seem not to be there for their children, and this causes a lot of. It has devastating consequences to especially black boys.
What is it saying? I mean, I'm seeing the number 36% there. What is that?
This is 36% of the households are headed by single mothers in South Africa, and these are mostly black single mothers.
So nearly 2/5 of the households in South Africa are run by a single parent woman.
That's the thing. And then with people are trying to do to make a difference, like Rams Mabote here, who is creating this project to sort of impact those people that those children that do not have fathers at home or helping single mothers with certain issues, because most of the boys don't know what they're supposed to do in this society because they've never seen their fathers do certain things in society, right?
So you're teaching these young men. Is this something that we should put into our curriculum? How to be a man, how to be a father?
Well, I really don't think so, Peter. But I think most importantly, this has to start from home. The fathers that are there, I think they have an important role in as much as we have these very demanding work. Kids, they look up to a father figure as a role model. So there has to be some kind of, you need to make time for your kids, guide them, prepare them so that even when a young man is going to meet, a young lady, they understand how women must be treated. But you're talking about these statistics. We also have to face the reality that there are houses that don't have, fathers. So what do we do? But I think we also need to go back to, the concept where I grew up, where they would talk about your father. I also have to look at your father as my father, so that community, they don't suffer from some of these social ills that we have seen.
All right, okay. So let me stay with you then, Shepherd, because you had the other stories which are on the front pages now. I think it's the Sunday Times as well as the City Press, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Sunday Times and the City Press about the Sunday Times actually points out Molefe as the main man in the Transnet lie, and then the other ones are called Gupta generals by the City Press. And I think this is a very good starting point in tackling corruption in South Africa. But, this is only part of the bigger picture that is being tackled. And my wish is that South Africa be cleansed of the corruption that is going on. And this actually brings us to the question of what is the face of corruption in South Africa? What's the definition of corruption in South Africa? What is state capture in South Africa? Did it start with the Guptas? or we've always had other forms of state capture that we've not confronted because they are not reported in a certain way in the media because of the political economy of the media, issues of ownership, advertising, and the like. But what's important here is the detail in the story and the main players in this corruption in the Transnet saga. And for me, really, my wish is that this just doesn't end here. You go deeper, and people are called into account.
So people are reading about state capture, and but it's almost getting to that point where no one's been arrested, no one's gone to jail. There could be this weariness that actually we're just going to keep on talking about it. Do you sense that there's movement on this?
Well, not really. I think a lot still needs to be done, Peter. If we are really serious about cleaning, something really needs to be done. If you look at these figures, it's alarming that you're talking about not just millions of rands, but just as I was going through the story, they're mentioning 19 billion. That's a lot of money. Just between 2011 to 2014. So a lot still needs to be done, because some of the problems that we are sitting with today, whether you're talking about the health sector, whether you're talking about young people having to go to school, it comes from this, in my view, because people are suffering. People are going to hospitals where there are no proper medical facilities, simply because some people are failing to account, because this is money that should be helping our people.
One last question on this. Do you think that journalism is telling the story properly? Because you've mentioned, did state capture start here? Are the Guptas the only family? What other forms of state capture exist that we're ignoring? Do you think that the storytelling is being done correctly? Because the moment you say state capture, you only think about the Guptas, and perhaps that's not fair.
Yeah, well, corruption in South Africa is a black or Indian face. Let's face it. That's what corruption is. And when I say we need to relook and redefine what corruption is, what state capture is, we need to go back to say, where did this thing start, and who has benefited from this, and let's call them into account. And we need to call everybody into account. That the Molefe and the other guys have been called, they must be called into account. But we need a situation where we go back. Now, this is investigative journalism that has to deal with all these issues. But both reports, I think, the Sunday Times spoke to Molefe's lawyer, and the City Press spoke to Brian Molefe himself, and I think they tried to sort of get the views of those who are actually accused in a way, and also the detail in the report. So there's sort of, to a certain extent, some sort of a balance. Okay. But what we need now from the journalists, investigative journalism, to go back in time to say, maybe since 1994, whatever time it is, how did these things start? How have they affected South Africa? We might be going through load shedding now, definitely not due to a strike, but due to some other issues. But when did these things start? Did they start last month? Did they start when Jacob Zuma became president? When did they start? What's the genesis of this?
But maybe just very quickly, Peter, just to say, we also need to go further and say, who does this affect? Take an example of somebody who is hospitalized, and I'm not going to mention some of those hospitals. You go there, you find people that are discharged, not because somebody is now fit enough to go back home, but you are told they're sent home because there's not enough food to feed them.
We're running out of space, beds, people are coming in sick, so we've got to discharge them as quickly as we can. All right, so very concerning. Okay, we're going to move away a little bit from the papers and focus our attention a little bit on what's been happening on the digital front. And we're looking at the top trending stories on social media. And there's more on this in this little story produced by Lebo Shangela.
Hashtag World Cup kicked off the week at the top of South Africa's trending topics on social media. The World Cup opened in Russia on Thursday with host country hammering Saudi Arabia 5-0. People on social media reacted to the opening match. 2 people were killed in a mosque in Malmesbury outside Cape Town on Thursday while observing the ritual of itikaf. This incident follows the attack on a mosque at Verulim in KwaZulu-Natal last month, in which 1 person was killed and 2 wounded. Social media users have sent their condolences to the victims' loved ones and have condemned the incident. Eskom implemented load shedding nationwide this week. This comes after the national grid was constrained due to alleged acts of sabotage and intimidation by members of the trade unions who are currently on strike. Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane appeared before Parliament's Justice Portfolio Committee to table her report on the Public Protector's rules. While some came to her defense, others called for Mkhwebane not to be compared to her predecessor.
We give you a front row seat to all the local and international entertainment news on Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
And shut up, you stay lazy and listen.
The Honourable President told me to shut up.
It's up to the leadership of the DA whether we continue to fight like we are doing now or we put the people of the city of Cape Town first.
It has been deeply disappointing in some ways that Mayor Dillon has not displayed a similar regard for the best interests of the party.
You must go, Chief. You call me a dog here.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank the African National Congress for the deployment and for the ANC to agree that one must go on early retirement.
Booyama! Ma, come back and leave after giving us a signal.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. Now, before we get into our next area of kind of discussion, I just wanted to get some feedback from what the social media has been telling us from you. This is what the public are worried about: Public Protector, World Cup finals, the killings at the mosque, and Eskom. What's grabbed your attention from those two? Let's start with you.
The one thing that grabbed my attention is about, Eskom, and of course, I mean, it's a call for concern because people are worried about, power failure. And Peter, I find it very strange that we seem to forget that not so long ago we were promised that there will never be load shedding ever again, and here we are. What happened? Why do we find ourselves in this space where people again, they're worried about a power failure? And of course, I mean, that raises a number of questions, to be honest with you. But just during that ad break, we were talking about the rise in terms of employment, the people that have now joined Eskom. As the numbers increases, what are these people doing there? You know, now you find yourself in a situation where somebody is saying no, there's no money, but people want their increases, and that for me, I think it just brings a lot of questions. It also talks about efficiency as well.
Okay, and last thought on one of the trends there.
The comparison between Thulima Donsela and Sibusisiwe Mkhwebane is quite intriguing. That some people actually, racializing it or putting identity issues into it. But what comes to me when I look at these issues, like Thulima Donsela set the bar so high that it's becoming difficult for Sibusisiwe Mkhwebane to actually jump over it.
I suppose for her, she just had to do her job. But when you start getting caught saying you must pay the costs and your report has gone beyond, if you just do your job, that's it. Surely, isn't that what people expect?
Yeah, surely. But people, on social media, people always have ideas and thoughts about anything and everything. Some analytical and some not so analytical, but there's truth in them because that's what they think. And also the World Cup. I think one of the most intriguing tweets, I don't know why you didn't pick it up. Nigerian players went to their president to tell them that they are bringing the World Cup. And somebody said, now African leaders know what it means to have false promises.
and they didn't start very well. They lost 2-0 to Croatia yesterday. So it's not.
I think the president is now feeling some promises he makes to his nation. Now the team met him. But I think it's important also that people, especially in South Africa, where there's so much going on, they can get time off. As it were, to focus on the World Cup, but what with ESCOM blackouts threatening, people won't enjoy the World Cup, and they'll always
generator sales are going to go up again. All right, let's refocus ourselves in another area, which is a bit of a problem, and I think it's not just in the media industry, but across the board generally. And sexism, well, that's remaining a major problem in the media industry worldwide, and the question around the lack of attention that it receives. Let's take a look at this story.
Of the Portuguese Association of International Press should be reprimanded for his disgusting and sexist comments at a global media event in Lisbon, Portugal last night.
They are my angels, and I don't know if I am prepared to share them with you.
Which really was like a Me Too moment for journalism conferences.
The event started with a comedian who said that people prefer fake news more than real news in the same way that they like fake breasts more than real ones. Not appropriate. At the end of the event, the chairman called his favorite female colleagues on stage.
This is a dream team.
Called them his Charlie's Angels.
I'm Charlie, and they are the angels.
Made them wear capes.
I want you, Maria, help me to put the cape one of them.
And even tried to kiss one of them.
In the name of all of you, I'm going to kiss Christy.
Oh my fuck.
She's shy. Kiss, please.
She did not want to be touched.
Portuguese girl, you are not so shy. So a big hug and a big kiss.
He even praised the father of one of the women, saying that her success was impossible unless he made her.
It was inappropriate. It should not have happened, but the only way to address that is to call it out.
Probably I didn't think deep enough that others could have different culture from mine.
Within Portuguese culture, was your statements okay?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely okay, normal.
Really? Yeah. So the Portuguese people wouldn't have been offended by anything?
No, not at all.
Portuguese women in the room who came to speak to women from other cultures to express their disgust, their shame, their intimidation. They felt humiliated.
Unfortunately, the sexism in the media industry is not unique to Portugal. It's a global problem.
The last night confirmed to us that sexual harassment is alive and well in the industry.
We have a world of media that is run by men.
The presenters are men, the cameramen are men, the producers are men. Men. The people on stage are men. In 2018, why are we still talking about this?
I have no idea.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm at the 70th World Media Congress. Here's a picture of some of the world's media leaders in 1948. And here's a picture today. They're still 100% white, 100% male. One thing is blindingly obvious. Journalists spend all their time writing about rights for women, but when it comes to gender equality, the media industry is one of the worst in the world. On average, just 25% of experts that are featured on the front pages of newspapers and on TV are women. Of the world's top 100 media companies, just 17% have women in senior leadership roles.
It actually skews our view of what is news. It skews our idea of what are the priorities.
Technology is holding some women back. Who are the leaders in Silicon Valley, led by a lot of guys?
With women, we're the makers of this earth.
The news industry needs good women, but more importantly, it needs the men to get involved as well.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now! So how do we increase gender equality in your organization? Well, like a fitness tracker. Measure it. You can't fix a problem unless you can measure how bad it is. Get everybody to take responsibility for it. Make that data public. There's nothing like the pressure of accountability from the public. This is #OurStories. What's yours?
Okay, I have no words, and perhaps you can comment very briefly. Let me start with you, Shepard.
I think this is disgusting. And you have a man sitting at White House now who, you remember the famous toilet talk or whatever, lockroom talk, and our young boys will see somebody who does that to women rising into the highest echelons of state power, and women's success attributed to men, and it's so disgusting.
Why are we here? And this is happening in South Africa as well, but not just in the media, right across. Why are we here?
Peter, let me start by saying what we've just watched there, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's awful, to be honest. But I think for a very long time we have probably allowed ourselves to get to a space where we think men are better than women. If you listen to that man referring to these ladies as the dream team, my Charlie angels, he goes on to say this one, her success is attributed to her father's success. that it cannot be.
Is this a generational thing? Because what I'm seeing in that guy is that he almost doesn't know that what he's doing is wrong. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference when you do something and you know you shouldn't, but he sounds like someone who doesn't realize what he's doing is wrong. That it might have been acceptable behavior back then.
But how did he even get to that position if he's failing to understand basic things like these?
You know, this is male privilege, like patriarchy 101, straight up, and similarly to white privilege. You never notice it. You know, there's some things that you do as a man that you think they're natural, and when you're called out, you become defensive. And probably this is how he's been raised up. This is how he's seen the world. And when we speak about gender equality, it's only on paper. It's only these white papers and blueprints and stuff. But we don't do gender. We only speak about it, but we don't get to the ground to do it. And as a father to a daughter, if you're to do that to my daughter on stage and I'm there, I'm coming up to punch you. there's no other reaction that you expect to that. We cannot be condemning it in the media.
All right.
And I think people need to learn a lesson.
This is a subject we're going to have to do a whole program on, but unfortunately, as we always do, run out of time. I just want to say thank you very much for watching Media Monitor, and I hope that you have a great and wonderful Father's Day, and please don't be part of that 36%. We want 100% of fathers showing up, taking care of their children. From us and the team, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye. See you next week.